Welcome back. I usually say to Rabbi Dr. Eliezer Brodt, but we have a special guest from Los Angeles, so we're spanning the globe. We have Rabbi Brodt in Eretz Yisrael, and we have Dr. Weiss on the West Coast. I'm here on the East Coast in the middle. Dr. Stephen Weiss is somebody who's put his life into Maseches Avos, and we felt it's an opportune time to have a conversation with him. We have just finished learning Maseches Avos in Mishnah Yomi, and it is summertime. And summertime, which we'll get into, is a time when Klal Yisrael is focused on Pirkei Avos, and maybe we'll hear it. Maseches Avos, Pirkei Avos. I personally have seen different ways the Mishnayos are split up in Pirkei Avos and Maseches Avos. I know it might not be on the questions we discussed, but that's something that's fascinating. And we're looking forward to a conversation, hearing how Dr. Weiss got into Avos. And what you see behind Dr. Weiss is just a few of the thousands of Seforim he's gathered on Pirkei Avos, and he actually compiled a bibliography, which Rabbi Brodt has in his hands, and he could pick up and show. How many pages is it? It is hundreds. Dr. Weiss will tell us exactly what it is. I think it has every sefer that he's compiled until 2015 when it was published. If I get it wrong, Dr. Weiss will fill us in. And we're looking forward to a conversation about Maseches Avos. So thank you, Dr. Weiss, for joining us.
My pleasure.
Okay, so take us back to the beginning. Tell us a little bit about yourself, and then jump ahead till the time when you started getting into Maseches Avos.
Well, before I do that, since you brought up Pirkei Avos and Maseches Avos, what can be useful is, it's part of Mishnayos. So when it's part of Mishnayos, it's the Masechta. And it consists only of 5 prakim, because the last Perek Vav is a brisa that was later included from the time of, probably from the Gedolim. And Pirkei Avos would include that last Perek, which is a brisa. And from the earliest part of printing, I think even the Mishnayos with the Rambam from 1492 describes it as being Pirkei Avos. Okay, so what got me into it? By training, I'm a gastroenterologist. While I was doing my fellowship at NYU, on weekends, I'd sometimes go to the Lower East Side, look at those famous iconic bookstores, and I found a shelf full of Pirkei Avos, pretty cheap, but none of which I had, and I bought that. Now, fast forward to Los Angeles, where I did my fellowship at UCLA. I joined a alumnus shir, which was very intense, and I was asked to give my own shir on Pirkei Avos in a more relaxed fashion. So I started looking for sources. And when I exhausted the sources in print, that bookshelf, that I had, and the standards, I started looking for out of print. I was introduced to Chaim Jalowski in Eretz Yisrael, a well-known book dealer who's just a pleasure to work with. And at that point, I started becoming obsessed. And not only collecting, but I wanted to know all that was out there. So at every opportunity, I visited libraries all over America, over Europe. I describe it in the book, in the introduction, and in both Hebrew and in English. And there I recorded on my DAS database, which was made by Rivka Klein. I have to give her credit. Her husband is an Avrech in Lakewood for 30, 40 years. She was daughter of a baker in Satmar, and she was also the head of Navy acquisitions, Naval Air Force. Anyhow, so I was able to do a complete database, which was converted to Word by Raphael Shmulevitz, grandson of the Raphael Shmulevitz. He did it over one night. And based on my review of in libraries and in bibliographies, I think I completed recording any sefer on Avos, including Seforim that had a small section on Avos that included a title. So I went from giving a shir to becoming, my life, my avocation. And the product of that is the book that I published.
So Rabbi Brodt frequently talks about, he uses the term obsession, which is a term that you've used, people that are junkies in a certain topic, in Torah. So it seems like this is something that you've put your life towards. How many Pirushim / Seforim have you documented on Maseches Avos?
Okay, so in the book, there's 1,500 Seforim. Pirushim are over 1,000 because in the book, in the bibliography, I include different editions, so that even though there are 1,500, there are different editions of the Rambam and of the Maharam, et cetera, but there are over 1,000. So it comes close to competing with the Yudlov's, magisterial book on Haggadot, which I think there are 4,000, but he includes translations, and I haven't included those yet. Together with the translations, it's going to be something closer to 3,000. But for Seforim, at least in 2015, 1,500. And since 2015, over the last decade, there are probably 20 new Seforim that come out every year. So there are probably another 200 in another part of the library. Many.
So I was, I guess, tickled and proud that I found my great-great-grandfather's sefer on Pirkei Avos. But when I told this to Dr. Weiss, it's like, it would be an embarrassment if I didn't have that in my book. That's a sefer Nachlas Tzvi from my great-great-grandfather, Rav Nachlas Tzvi Brisk, who was a son-in-law of the base Naftali, who was a son. Oh, wow. And he even has the original. What does the stamp say? I can't see. What does the stamp say?
The stamp says Nachlas Tzvi Brisk.
Wow. Okay.
One of the things he included, that unless it's signed by the Maharam, it's not legitimate, which is something that many have done, although there are many Seforim out there that don't have the signatures.
Okay,
by the
so
way,
we have
in those days, this is the usual size of the sefer. It was, of course, reprinted from in the 70s, which was a Tefus Tzilim. And as you probably know, it came out again in bigger form.
And that's the only one that I have. So I think if you look in,
by the way,
it's
a beautiful sefer. I really enjoy it.
Thank you. If you look in that one, I'm pretty sure it mentions my grandfather in there, but that's not for this conversation. It's not about me. So I was middle of saying that Nachlas Tzvi Brisk is a son-in-law of the base Naftali, who was a son of the famed Kol Aryeh, and I have no idea if he has a special pirush on Avos. I don't think so, but maybe he has it.
Yes. And see, this is what people have been doing lately. They'll take, let's say, all the writings of the Kol Aryeh, and they'll pick out wherever something that was related to Avos. I don't really consider that really a legitimate pirush, and it's been published that way. So in his original Kol Aryeh, there may be 4 pages, Maseches Avos or Pirkei Avos, but in the recent publication, it'll include everything he said about Avos in all of his writings.
Incredible. So let me turn to Rabbi Dr. Brodt, because now we have to get into the history. Rabbi Brodt, take it away.
Yeah, so first we want to ask you is, so you documented all this about Maseches Avos. Was there a specific time when you would say there was an explosion of learning Maseches Avos and of writing Maseches Avos?
I can say that very soon, at the beginning of the 16th century, which corresponds to the early era of printing, there was, I would say, an explosion of Gerushe Sforad, whose works were printed. The Abarbanel has a very important sefer, Nachlas Avos, printed along with his Rosh Hashanah and his Haggadah in his lifetime, probably the first sefer that was printed in the lifetime of the Maharam. And then you have the Yavitz, and you have Rav Chiyun, and you have Yehudah Lerma, all Gerushe Sforad, who wrote their Perushim, and from different angles. By the way, at that time, these Seforim were thicker, and because they included all sorts of different allusions to their philosophy or their anti-philosophy in the case of the Yavits. But then it seems that there were just many that came up besides the Rambam and besides those Hamayuchas Larashi. By the way, nowadays, the best Seforim that are coming out are those that are researching works in manuscript, like Yaakov Shmuel Spiegel, who finds manuscripts on Avos and does a extensive movo on the sources and prints early manuscripts. But again, probably in the 16th century, there was this wide, and nowadays you'll find an explosion of the same Pirush printed one after another. There must be 10 Rabbeinu Yoinas on Maseches Avos, each from a different angle.
Just recently, there was 2 Chatzad Yavitzes that came out at the same time. 2 people were working on it, and they didn't tell each other. And one guy didn't complete it, one guy did. But
and guess what? There's a third.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. By the way, it used to be that a printer would find out, let's say, Giustiani Press would find out that Bragadini Press is coming out with a sefer. They must have had spies, and they also came up with the same sefer, almost sometimes the same layout.
Oh, yeah.
Because they said, well, if he thinks it's popular, going to sell, I am going to.
Yeah.
But the classics, we have, the Rambam, with a Spanish background, of course, Rashi with a French background, very different kind of Perushim. But we'll talk about Rashi soon, I think.
Okay. One other question is, now, when did we, which is part of the excuse of having this discussion now, is when did it become so popular to learn in the summer?
Very good. So first of all, it became popular in general when it was included in Sidurim. It became part of the Tefillah Shabbos. After Mincha, you'd find Mincha L'Shabbos and then Pirkei Avos. And in Machzorim, you find Pirkei Avos with Perushim. The first Seforno was in a Machzer B'nai Roma. And so I would say when it became part of the Siddur, it became popular. And as far as the summer, there are different minhagim. And there are those minhagim, it's found that they said Pirkei Avos all year. There are minhagim where they did the whole Masechta every week. But the majority was like the minig in Spain, where from Pesach and culminating in the week before Shavuos, where that's the reason the 6th parak, the Brisa, Kinyan Torah, was felt to be very appropriate for the week before Shavuos. So that's when it started becoming very, very popular. And when Rabbonim wanted to publish their Chedushim, very often they would have in their files the shiurim that they gave to the Olam. And as a matter of fact, the young Nachlas Tzvi writes in his introduction, that's just an example, that it's based on the shiurim that he gave over the summer, and which he wrote down soon after having given the shiur Matzah Shabbos.
I guess the question is, what came first? They say the chicken or the egg. Was it put in Sidurim because it was something that was being learned, or because it was Sidurim, people started learning? I'm sure it must have been some of both.
Well, again, it was from the time of the Gedolim that it became the practice, and with the addition of Kinyan Torah, Shalom Hagon, whatever. And you're right. It's relatively easy learning. And it's, all Mu'urvim Abrios, and it became...
Yes, it's it's certainly something which I think is probably underappreciated and underlearned. Now, I mean, as I've gotten older, I've spent more time learning Maseches Avos, and they talk about having a Musar Seder. You could have many Musar Sedarim just focusing on Maseches Avos. It is the foundation of, as it's called in English, right? What's the ethics? Well, what's the official name in English?
Fathers.
Ethics of the Fathers.
Chapters of the Fathers.
Chapters of the Fathers.
Sprüche
Okay.
right there.
Yeah. So, would you be able to tell us? It's sort of an unfair question because it's probably a lot more, but in our time allowed, maybe 2 or 3 Gedolim who are only famous or very famous because of their pirush on Maseches Avos.
The most famous classic pirush on Avos is the Medrash Shmuel. Shmuel de Yozida. He was a Talmud of the Arizal in Tzfas. He wrote other Seforim, but Medrash Shmuel, which consists of a compilation of 8 or 9 different Perushim that were in print already, and a number of manuscripts. And he did it so well that there were 4 printed in his lifetime. And since that time, to this very day, it's being reprinted. There must be 30, 35 editions of Medrash Shmuel. More recently, Yehudah Lerma, Lechem Yehudah, one of the Gerushay Sforad, who wrote his Pirush and was only just recently republished. He's well known simply for that sefer. Another reason he's known for that sefer is his introduction. And that's one of the fun things part of collecting, and is what you see in introductions about Jewish history and different eras. And in his introduction, he describes the burning of the Talmud in 1553, because along with the decree that all the Shasim in Italy, Rome, Venice, etc., was his own first edition of 1,500 copies, which were all submitted to the flames. And in his second edition, the following year, he describes this in the introduction, and he started writing anew. And then he found one copy that was Ud Mutzol Me'esh, and he looked at it, he says, you know what, my second is better than the first, so come out and get the sefer. And this is, so his introduction is quoted all over. It was reprinted. I'll tell you something interesting about that. It's very philosophical, and Yaakov Hillel Yaakov Moshe Hillel is the one who reprinted it. And it has a very interesting introduction where he says that this was written before the revelation of the Zohar, where the true, Maaseh Bereshis and Maaseh Merkava, but until then they didn't know that. So he wrote it philosophy. It's still important to know, to see his ideas, but you'll see that he is careful to discount his views. So they're becoming more well known. Those are a few examples.
I just wanted to add one thing to this. It was very interesting. Is that when the Lechem Yehudah came out from Ahavat Shalom just recently, so literally around that time, they published a autobiography of Rav Dov Ber Berkentile from a Professor Gershon Dov Hundret. Now, this was a Jew that he was alive he was involved with the Frankist debates defending the Talmud against the Frankists. And he writes that he had this rare sefer Lechem Yehudah, which was very rare, and that he quotes from it a justification for why you have to learn philosophy and all these things, because you have to know Mala Hashav Lapikairis. And he was involved with the debates at the time, and he was a very worldly person, a tremendous Talmud Chacham. The Gedolim liked him a lot. So I found it fascinating was literally this autobiography came out, a critical edition, the same time Yaakov Hillel published this rare Lechem Yehudah, and I was like, what? He had the Lechem Yehudah. This Birkenthal had the Lechem Yehudah, which is very rare, if I'm not mistaken. There's not so many copies, at least of the original one. It came out almost the same weeks.
So very interesting. And since you mentioned the original one, I was aware of one copy in the Bodleian Library. And when I visited Oxford, I called for it and I looked at the title page and I started swooning. I mean, it's such a rare sefer printed the year before. And it's in a beautiful Bragadini print with the 3 crowns. About a year ago, a librarian in the National Library of Israel did some sleuthing, and he did find another copy in the National Library of Florence. But so we know of 2 copies that exist. By the way, it's in the book too, but this is the second edition. By the way, does it come out backwards?
No, it comes out good.
Okay, and here is the introduction. And you might notice there is a censor's mark, okay, from a Geraldini from 1556. Okay. He is a well-known censor. He was the first one hired by the Pope to do it, and ostensibly because he knew how to analyze a sefer. Who was Geraldini? So Yaakov Botzenbaum finally, compellingly traced him to Rav Yosef Me'arls, a Rosh Yeshiva in Italy, in Siena, with a sort of a checkered history as far as his machlokas with others, but a master of writing and of Melitza and poetry and some Chedushim as well. And what's interesting is that even after he converted, he was still approached by communities, so that maybe there's a very note in a manuscript in the Strasbourg collection, how I heard good news. You can go to Harav Hagaon, Harosh Yeshiva, Harav Yosef Arls, and he has influence, in the Vatican, and perhaps our Gemaras and our Seforim will not be confiscated. In fact, in this second copy, which probably has more anti-Christian material than the first, there's not one cross out. He was fired after a year and a half because he wasn't doing his job, but he saved a lot of Seforim.
Wow. So the book that you were holding a minute ago, that's from when? How old is that book?
That's from the following year, from 1554. And it was from Savionetta, which was not subject to the burning of the Seforim. In the letters, there's somebody named Stern, Moritz Stern, published the letters of the papal decrees, the bullae, Bullae, or the bulls of the Pope, and where they were so anti-Judaism that they said, well, when the Pope said you have to burn the Talmud, everything that's derived from the Talmud, all the different Seforim, Yaakov, practically everything, and he even included Pirkei Avos in the letter, Pirtheavoth, as being part of it, to that extent that they wanted to destroy Yehadus.
Wow.
Since we're talking about that, it's probably one of my favorite Seforim to show visitors, is because what led to the burning of the Shas in 1554. Eliezer, do you want to comment?
Not yet.
So it supposedly, at least until recent scholarship, it was assumed that the Maharam MePaduah printed a Mishnah Torah, and he was going to do it with one particular printer in Italy. You couldn't print in Italy if you were a Jew. But there were other presses so he was going to print with one, but then he went to another. As soon as he printed with Bragadini, the competing printer, Giustanini, came out with the same sefer, except criticizing the Maharam MePaduah. He included it, but he criticized him. So MePaduah felt he's going to lose his great investment that he put in this sefer. So he asked a shaila, and he sent the shaila to a great Rav in Eastern Europe. And he paskined that everybody has to buy all of the Bragadini, Maharam MePaduah versions before they can buy the other version. So Yustanini felt that if he can go to a rabbi, I can go to the Jesuits. And all the Jesuits needed was an excuse to ban a sefer. And ultimately, that led to more examination of the Talmud in general and to the destruction of the Talmud in Italy, and therefore the destruction of learning Chiddushei Shas in Italy, perhaps leading to the emphasis on Kabbalah, which was printed very soon afterwards in Italy. Who was the Rav who he sent this shaila to, this young Rav?
The
Ramah. And it's a very long tshuva. It's tshuva yud in his Shas and Tshuvas about whether the halachos of hasagas gavul apply to a guy, and he ultimately came up with that psak, not realizing that once you start off with the Vatican and with Jesuits, you never know what is going to happen.
Yeah. A lot has been written from this tshuva of all the copyright tumults. It starts from this. One of the main sources that it starts from is from this tshuva and this Torah of the Ramah and what was written at that time.
Incredible, fascinating story, and it's appropriate. We're recording this during the 9 days when one of the things that we think about and is mentioned in the kinos are the destruction of Seforim and Talmud throughout the generations.
If you visit, if you go to Venice, in the Campo de' Fiori, there's now a plaque, this is the place where they took scores of wagon loads of Seforim and burnt them publicly. And many Seforim, the tears that were shed when seeing this. And that hasn't stopped, unfortunately, at least now down to our days.
Yeah.
One controversial.
That leads us to the next topic: is a controversial svarim on Avos. Was there any such? Would you give any example of a sefer on Avos controversial? That maybe even needed to be was even burnt. Is there such an example, or not burnt, but just as controversial?
Okay. Well, let me start with something that's not so controversial and then get to the real controversial one. Rashi on Avos. So in the printed versions, in the Medrash Shmuel, it includes an Avos. In the one of the Machzorim, there's an Avos. The Maral includes an Avos. There's a Sefer Lev Avos that was recently reprinted. All have Rashi on Avos, and they're all different. They're all different versions. And the question is, which one is authentic? And they're very different. So there are scholars who have looked at these things, and they're trying to come up with what might be an early edition. As you would imagine, you would think that one that resembles Rashi would be the more possible source. The scholars have concluded, and by the way, besides scholars, the Yaivitz already was very suspicious that this doesn't sound like Rashi. This is not his style, his cryptic, encrypted style of Pirush. And there is a manuscript in Italy of an early Pirush that is ascribed Hamayuchas Larashi. And it just so happens I have one such manuscript that I acquired at a Christie's sale from the Montefiore Library, which is from the 14th century. I don't know if you can see here, Moshe Kibbel Torah Sinai. And there is a scholar in Eretz Yisrael, based on the microfilm of this particular copy, who is working on an edition that compares the different versions. So there probably is a Rashi. It's a lot simpler than the one that we're used to seeing. And ultimately, we should come to some kind of conclusion. There aren't any autographs of Rashi, al Torah, etc. Now, so that was did Rashi write a Pirush on Avos? A bit of a controversy. Probably the most famous controversy is that of the Yaein Levonon, the Pirush on Avos, printed by Naftali Tzvi Wessley. So his first edition came out in 1774, and in Berlin, and it included a very nice haskama, or letter of support, from the Lechem Yehudah. Okay. He was close to the school of Mendelssohn. He wasn't the same kind of, he was a maskil for sure. And he became infamous when he wrote a Sefer Divrei Shalom ve'emes, where a naive, even though he was a traditional and he was observant, and he understood Torah, he criticized, the approach. And since the emperor had just come up with a decree giving freedom to Jews, but they have to get an education, and he was all for education, many went back on their haskamat. And the journal Kobis Beis Yisrael, Beis Aharon v'Yisrael, has a series of articles showing how all those who criticized Naftali Tzvi Wessley, because pretty much banned. Now, I heard about this sefer from one of the Rabbonim in town, who's also a Musvach of Torah V'das, a Talmud of Rabbi Yaakov, and there's nothing in it that is at all controversial. It's beautifully written, and about the same time that the Mesilas Yesharim came up, which changed the way Seforim were written. The language became much more accessible, more biblical, more poshut, and less malitza. So it's a beautiful sefer, but it was criticized, and it was banned by many. But the next generation seems to have held it to be very, very good and useful. Even the Talmud Mufak of the Lechem Yehudah, Rabbi Eliezer Fleckelis, in his, this is not on Avos, but although they did print his Chedushim on Avos that are, from all his other forms, but Oilus Chodesh, the 4th edition, where he speaks against Shabsai Tzvi, and he feels that too many people are learning Kabbalah when they're not prepared. And in this sefer, again, this is the Talmud Mufak of the Lechem Yehudah, following the Hagdama and the Psicha, he includes a letter by Naftali Hertz Wessley, where the latter quotes Yonason Eibschitz about the proper way to learn. And he describes the Wessley as, let's see, where are my glasses? Separate set of glasses. Hamashirer Shiri Teferes, Hamelitz Echad Meni Elef, Hamahulal, Venoidel Rabim, Mimena Urav, in Chiburav, Ubiyurav, Ashakosa, Vachosa, Beksav Yoda, Lacher. Anyway, all sorts of praises of Naftali Tzvi Wessley. And finally, it was reprinted. It was reprinted many times anyway, but recently it's been reprinted by Yeshivas Hesder Rishon LeZion, And they quote all the different Rabbonim who quote Wessley. Now, this Sefer, Yaein Levonon, appeared in Eisen until somebody says, Yaein Levonon, the Lechem Yehudah says, it's usher to learn anything from that terrible Moscow. So they had to take it off the shelves. Do you remember that going on? So that's one of probably the main controversy. Yes.
So now I just want to you mentioned there's too much to mention on what you just spoke about with Naftali Wessley. I'm just going to mention 4 brief things to be meisif on your things we could spend hours talking about it. But number one is Divrei Shalom V'Emes was just republished for the first time in centuries by Mechon Meister Bialik. It was sold by Eisen, probably under the table. But 2 years ago, Naftali Wessley, he wrote the beer on Vayikra of Mendelssohn. That was sold in Eisen. Many Hasidim have it without realizing that they have volume 3 of Mendelssohn's original beer. Some cipher people. But the person who published the Yaein Levonon that you were picking up, it doesn't say his name in it because he was scared of getting banned in Eretz Yisrael. He lived in Bnei Brak at the time. Was Moshe Tzuriel. Moshe Tzuriel went ahead and he published all of the works of Naftali Wessley, except for Divrei Shalom V'Emes. He went and tracked down even the manuscripts and published them, and about 8-9 volumes came out in recent years. Just 2 other isafas to what he said is, number one is the haskama that you showed in the rear sefer of his, that he has where he brings from Yedus Neibshitz. People claim that's a forgery. It's not a forgery, but they claim it's a forgery. And certain editions of that sefer, they took out that haskama. It only exists in certain you have a rear one that has it, but in the different copies of it, the Marshal Mark Shapiro was once writing about it, and I quoted it somewhere, and he's like, he's opening up his copy that he sees on the internet and it doesn't have it. So I showed him I have one from an original and it exists. It's fascinating what he brings from Yosef Leibshitz, who we learned by. The last thing I'll mention is that with this also is specifically on Avos, Rav Kook's brother, who was a very big Talmid Chacham, wanted to borrow the Pirish from his brother Rav Kook. And Rav Kook couldn't find it, and he was upset. He said, there's a very good Pirish on Avos. And then he located it, and eventually he sends it to him. But he tells him, it sounds like, I think he said, don't leave it around, maybe, because not everyone can understand it. Maybe they get nervous. But if you look in the Sefer, it'd be hard to find anything that's really problematic. And many Gedolim did use it, such as Rav Shamshir Fol Hirsch and many others.
And you mentioned Shamshir Fol Hirsch. When you look at it retrospectively, he was sort of a precursor in terms of, Torah and, and Derech Eretz.
Yeah, his uncle was very close with Wessley and writes about him very bakavidik. He had an uncle that wrote about him.
Yeah, many of the, especially, the German Gedolim,
right.
Hildesheimer, etc., David Tzvi Hoffman, recognized the value. But it's one of the Seforim that I used to prepare a shir because it's so beautifully written. And it quotes Chazal and Psukim, etc., in a very fine language.
Okay, so Dr. Weiss, thank you so much so far for your time. I know we're getting close to when you have to go. So we had 2 more things we wanted to discuss. I don't know if you have time for both, but I'll put them both on the table now and take it away. 5 Pirushim, you might have discussed a couple of them, but maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 incredible Pirushim that you would say, if you haven't seen these, get your hands on them, and Eliezer could tell us, and maybe you could tell us if they're available on Hebrew books or Netzer HaChachma, even if they're not available to buy. And then before you go, I know besides for all the Seforim, which we have not yet had a chance to see the whole panoramic view of your library, but I know you have some collectibles also. Maybe a couple of them you want to show the audience before we sign off.
Okay. So besides the Yaein Levonon, there's something called the Toldos Yehoshua by Yeshua Heller. It's a beautiful sefer, and it's been reprinted. There's something called Meir Avos, and I can give you the references later for those who are interested, where he takes Tanakh and compares it to Avos. It's just a beautiful sefer used to prepare. Lahiris Nassan from Nachlas Tzvi is a very good sefer. Nowadays, if you had to get one sefer, it's not one sefer anymore. I don't know if you have. Let's see. well, on the top shelves. Anyway, now they're not only thin, but they come out in multiple volumes. 6 volumes on one volume on each parak. So the Mesivta version is really superior. It's got a lot in it, and it's very well done in terms of checking backwards and forwards. But there are others, the Be'er Havos, Hegyone Avos, little gems of sources.
I'll just say that one I've come across, the Mechaber lives here in Lakewood, is called Pirkei Avos. The Mechaber's name is Rabbi Gelbwax, Rabbi Yeshua Gelbwax. I found that to be a fascinating, overall also. He'll cover, go back to the Rishonim and then covers a lot of the classics. If you want to just sit down, it's a very easy read. So I found that to be interesting, from a very contemporary sefer on Avos.
I wouldn't disagree. One of the other Seforim, now I think Rabbi Lau was the first to come out with 6 volumes, his Yachlis, which is also very good and also translated into English and very good. It's a likut. And again, for preparing a shir, if you want to get a broad view, the Derech HaChaim, originally, from the Maharal, is you can learn it, you could try a little bit, but the 7-8 volumes include so much that you almost sort of lose track. But just 1 second, the Rabbi Lau was not the first one to come out with multiple volumes. There is a sefer called Knesset Yisrael, printed in the 1920s by Yisrael Goldman, who includes Medrash Shmuel, and it's a modern day Medrash Shmuel, where he quotes from many different good Perushim or Rabbonim that he's heard, including, by the way, the Nachlas Tzvi, your great grandfather's sefer as well. And that's another thing. That's another sefer that I use. There's something called Pirush Man that includes philosophy and Kabbalah and Hasidus. The very first Hasidic sefer on Avos was appeared in the Slavita Siddur, very sought after, and it's called Ikvei Hatzain, which includes quotations from all the great Hasidic Rabbonim, Talmidei Baal Shem Tov. So it depends on what you can find everything in that category.
So before we get to the collectibles, I'm sure Rabbi Brodt, as with his staunch Litvish background, and Dr. Weiss also, how about Reb Chaim Volozhin or Ruach Chaim, which seems to have been...
Absolutely, it's got to be there. The Ruach Chaim, which is like an extension of the Nefesh HaChaim. There are, 4 or 5 different Seforim recently printed, but the original is very good. Includes the Groz allusions to different psukim within it, and very, very valuable. Rabbi Lamb did a whole analysis of Torah Lishma. Before I get to, briefly, before I get to the Judaica, the different things that are allude to Avos, one of the great things about having many Seforim and is that you can make a conversation over the generations. You could take something like Torem Derech Eretz or Ohev Malachos Nos Harabonos. What did the Rambam say in Spain? What did Rashi say in Germany? What did the Yaivitz say, when he was expelled? And what do modern day? And so when you compare the difference form, there's a sefer Avos Harishainim, where somebody gathered, I think the Tosha Rebbe's son-in-law, gathered all the different Rishainim on Avos, discussing these different things. Rabbi Kiva, Hakol, Yediyah and Bechira, Hakol Sofi versus Nitna. So again, having different Seforim and comparing them, you get an idea. You'll see when you look at your grandfather's sefer about these different issues about Yediyah and Bechira, or about giving credit to one's spouse for the learning that they had, like in his Hagdama, and you compare it to others' views, you get a broad view, a sight into Jewish history. So you asked about Judaica items. There are a lot, and in the book, there's a little section. When I showed it to Yitzchak Yudloff, when I was planning on doing it, I showed him I want to have pictures. He says, "What? There's a comic book section in it?" No, but like Vinograd also included pictures of Seforim and different things. So there are the Mishnah of Yehudah ben Tema, which have a
Az Kanemer.
Yeah, Az Kanemer, Kal Kanesher, Nachlas Tzvi, V'Gibor Ka'ari, Laser Ton of Vichor Shua Shemayim. So here is a crown, the accession from the Beis Medrash Shar Hashemayim in Yerushalayim, where who's it? The father of Rav Auerbach
Chaim Leib Auerbach. Chaim Leib.
Was Rav, and apparently it was old style sefer, but as you see, it refers to the different animals, and it also describes the Kalkanesher, Kanomer, and that appears all over the place. Fill-in boxes you have with different decorations, and then Lasus Ritzon Abicha Sheba Shamayim. Here is a summum holder with that iconography. There are many mizrachs. They're too big to bring over, and then there are other things that are described in the bibliography. Here's one that picks a different Mishnah. Can you read it? Read it for me.
Marbe Torah, Marbe Chaim, Marbe Yeshiva, Marbe Chachma.
Okay, so this is by Eliezer, who was a great artist, and that comes from Pirkei Avos, Mishnah Zion. Another one of my recent Seforim that I acquired was by an Israeli artist, and it's a metal piece of art where he did an Yaein Anili Nili Amosai. So talk about being obsessed. Okay, so there so there you have it. And I was zeicha to have a page of the Rambam's Pirush in Judeo-Arabic from the Geniza. Who was the original discoverer? Lechem Yehudah Wertheimer. So his family probably had to make a chasana, and so they sold a few pages. That's wonderful to have, and there are other. Let's see, what do I have here? Look at the book. There's a record with Akavya Ben Mahalal. There's sheet music that has to do with Pirkei Avos. And one very interesting thing is, this is from, I got it at Kestenbaum, a plaque where just like you give out for Elias, who gets Kohen Levi Shlishi, there was a minhag in many Spanish Portuguese communities that they would give the privilege of reading the parak of the week with their particular makam, with their particular niggin, and they would pass that out sometime during davening, so they would know to prepare it at a later time.
Well, Dr. Weiss, this has been fascinating. Maybe before we sign off, tell the audience where they could get your book safer.
Okay, they can contact me directly, avotmaven, avotmaven @gmail.com. Yisrael Mizrahi has copies. It might be easier to do that. And I periodically restock him with that. And I'd be happy to share.
Okay, so if you happen to be in the Los Angeles area and you want to visit Dr. Weiss and get a live view, be in touch with him as well.
One thing that we might do at another opportunity is discuss the translations of Pirkei Avos.
I was about to say that. Maybe just in your last minute, share what you're up to and something we could talk about more elaborately in the future.
It was translated into 35 different languages, and 100 in Yiddish, 100 in Ladino, 50 in French, 75 in German, but also in Marathi, also in, in Greek.
Where's the Chinese and Japanese?
Yeah.
Okay. Here's the Chinese. Rab Steinsaltz coached a scholar along to do it in Japanese. Oh, Japanese. Before I get to Japanese, there are 3 or 4 Korean versions of Pirkei Avos. Even the Pirush of Rabbi Lau, the 6 volumes, were translated into Korean. There is no Korean Shas. What they call the Talmud is something else. But there is a Japanese Shas. There is a Shas in Japanese. It's in the National Library. Very interesting story about how that came about. So I have about 700 to 800 different entries in different languages. And it's just really, really interesting to see who did these translations, why they did them, and just showing the great popularity of the wonderful wisdom that our Chazal have given us in the form of Pirkei Avos, Maseches Avos.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Weiss. This was a fascinating conversation. Bezras Hashem, we'll have another opportunity. Thank you, Rabbi Dr. Eliezer Brodt, for the introduction and the conversation. And we should all have a wonderful day. And since we're in the 9 days again, we should be zeicha to the Binyan Beis HaMikdash and have Dr. Weiss's Avos collection flown to Yerushalayim, Ir HaKodesh.
My wish.
Amen.